I want you to imagine something with me for just a moment. Imagine that buried deep inside your mind, right now at this very second, there is a force so powerful, so absolutely limitless, that if you learned how to speak its language, your entire life could transform within days, not months, not years, days. I'm not talking about positive thinking or wishful daydreams or crossing your fingers and hoping the universe throws you a bone. I'm talking about a scientific spiritual principle that I discovered decades ago, tested thousands of times, and watched change lives so dramatically that people thought it was magic. But it wasn't magic. It was something far more reliable. It was prayer, but not the kind of prayer you were taught in church. Not the begging, pleading, desperate kind where you grovel before a distant God, hoping he might notice you if you're good enough. No, this is the kind of prayer that commands reality itself. This is the prayer that made me famous, that brought people from all over the world to my door, that filled auditoriums with thousands of people hungry for the truth I'm about to share with you. And here's what shocks most people when they first hear it. This prayer takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's less time than you spend brushing your teeth. Less time than you spend scrolling through your phone looking at other people's lives. And in those 5 minutes, when done correctly, you set into motion forces in the invisible realm that must, by law, by the absolute immutable law of mind, manifest in your visible world. I've seen this prayer heal bodies that doctors had given up on. I've seen it restore marriages that were beyond saving. I've seen it turn financial disaster into abundance so quickly it left people speechless. And today, I'm going to break down exactly how it works, word by word, principle by principle, so that by the end of our time together, you'll have the most powerful tool you've ever possessed. But I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to teach you will challenge everything you think you know about prayer, about God, about reality itself. Are you ready? Then let me begin. What I'm about to share with you isn't theory. It isn't philosophy that sounds nice but doesn't work in the real world. This is something I lived. This is something that saved my life before I ever taught it to another soul. And that's where we need to start, because you need to understand that I didn't discover this prayer sitting in some ivory tower thinking pleasant thoughts. I discovered it in the darkness. I discovered it when I was desperate. I discovered it when every conventional approach had failed me, and I was staring into an abyss that terrified me. You see, there was a time in my life when I was completely lost. I had questions burning inside me that no one could answer. I had pain in my heart that no one could heal. I had been taught all the traditional religious practices, memorized all the right prayers, followed all the rules, and yet I felt empty. Completely empty. Worse than empty, actually. I felt disconnected from the very source of life itself. And the more I prayed the traditional way, the more hopeless I became. I would kneel and beg and plead, pouring my heart out to a God I imagined was somewhere far above me, maybe listening, maybe not, keeping score of my sins and virtues, deciding whether I deserved help. And nothing changed, nothing. My circumstances remained the same, my pain remained the same. And slowly, quietly, a dangerous thought began to form in my mind. What if none of this is real? What if there is no God? What if we're alone in an indifferent universe, and all of this prayer business is just humanity's way of comforting itself in the face of meaninglessness? That's a dark place to be, my friend. That's the kind of darkness that swallows people whole. But something inside me refused to give up. Some spark, some instinct, some whisper from a place deeper than my conscious mind told me I was missing something. Not that God didn't exist, but that I didn't understand how to reach him. Or perhaps more accurately, I didn't understand that I didn't need to reach him at all, because he was never separate from me in the first place. That realization, when it finally came, felt like waking up from a nightmare. It felt like being born, and it came not from a church or a priest or a holy book, though I studied them all. It came from studying the mind itself, from understanding that the kingdom of heaven is within you, not as a pretty metaphor, but as a literal, demonstrable, scientific fact. Your subconscious mind, you see, is connected to infinite intelligence. It It is connected to the creative power that formed galaxies and orchestrates the movement of atoms. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't require you to grovel. It doesn't require you to grovel. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and brings it into form, always, without exception. This is the law. And when I finally understood this, when I finally grasped that prayer wasn't about begging some external deity, but about impressing my subconscious mind with the feeling of my wish fulfilled, everything changed. Everything. Within days, not weeks or months, but days, I began to see shifts in my life that stunned me. And I realized I had stumbled onto something so powerful, so transformative, that I had a moral obligation to share it with anyone who would listen. The prayer itself is disarmingly simple. That's what throws most people off. They expect something complex, something that requires years of training or special initiation or secret knowledge. But the truth is always simple. Profound, yes. Life-changing, absolutely. But simple, here it is. Every morning and every evening for 5 minutes each time, you enter into a state of deep relaxation. You quiet your conscious mind with its endless chatter and worry and doubt. And in that peaceful state you imagine, with all the vividness you can muster, that you already have what you desire. Not that you will have it someday if you're lucky. Not that you will have it someday if you're lucky. Not that you're working toward it, but that you have it now, right now, in this present moment. You feel the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You hear the sounds that would be present if your desire were already realized. You see the scenes that would exist. You immerse yourself completely in the reality you wish to experience, and you do this with such conviction, such natural acceptance, that your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between this imagined reality and actual physical reality. And here's the key that most people miss. You don't do this with effort. You don't do this with effort. You don't do this with strain or force or desperation. You do this with ease, with the gentle assumption that this is simply true, the way you assume the sun will rise tomorrow, or your heart will beat without your conscious direction. This easy, natural assumption is what impresses the subconscious. This is what sets the law in motion. Now, let me stop here and address what I know some of you are thinking. You're thinking this sounds too easy. You're thinking if it were this sounds too easy. You're thinking if it were this simple, everyone would be doing it, and everyone would have everything they want. And you're right to be skeptical. I respect that. So let me tell you why most people fail with this, even when they try it. They fail because they don't understand the difference between wishing and believing. They fail because they bring doubt into their practice. They fail because they bring doubt into their practice. They fail because they do the prayer mechanically, without feeling like they're checking a box on a to-do list. They fail because they do it for 5 minutes and then spend the other 23 hours and 55 minutes of their day contradicting it with fearful thoughts and negative expectations. Your subconscious doesn't respond to your words. It doesn't care about your affirmations if your affirmations are just noise coming out of your mouth while your heart feels the opposite. Your subconscious responds only to feeling, to conviction, to the state of consciousness you dwell in. And that's why this prayer requires more than just reciting words. It requires more than just reciting words. It requires you to actually become, in consciousness, the person who already has what you desire. It requires a shift in your identity, in how you see yourself in your relationship to life. Let me give you a concrete example, because this is too important to leave in the realm of abstraction. Let's say you're struggling financially. You have debts piling up. You have debts piling up. You lie awake at night wondering how you'll make ends meet. The old way of praying would be to beg God to send you money, to please help you, to have mercy on your desperate situation. And you would pray that prayer from a state of fear and lack, reinforcing with every word the very poverty consciousness that's creating your situation. The new way, the true way, the way that actually works, is completely different. You would relax deeply, morning and evening, and you would imagine with all your senses what it would feel like to have financial freedom right now. Not someday, now. You would feel the relief in your body. You would feel the relief in your body. You would imagine checking your bank account and seeing abundance there. You would imagine the peace of mind that comes with knowing all your needs are met. You would imagine telling a friend with knowing all your needs are met. You would imagine telling a friend with genuine joy about how blessed you are. And you would do this not as fantasy, not as wishful thinking, but with the absolute conviction that you are simply remembering something that is already true in a dimension beyond the physical. You are impressing your subconscious with the feeling of wealth, and your subconscious with the feeling of wealth, and your subconscious, which controls all the automatic processes of your life, which connects you to infinite intelligence, which knows things your conscious mind cannot know, will begin to guide you. It will give you ideas. It will arrange seeming coincidences. It will open doors you didn't even know existed, not because you begged, but because you claimed. Not because you begged, but because you claimed. Not because you were desperate, but because you were certain. I cannot stress enough how revolutionary this is. This understanding turns religion and spirituality from systems of hopeful supplication into exact sciences. It reveals that we are not powerless victims begging for scraps from an unpredictable deity. We are creators, working with creative law, shaping our experience through the states of consciousness we choose to dwell in. This is what I mean when I say that prayer is not about changing God's mind. It's about changing God's mind. It's about changing your mind. It's about changing your consciousness. God, infinite intelligence, the universe, whatever word you prefer, is always giving you everything. It's always giving you everything. It's always saying yes. The question is, what are you asking for through the states you embody? When you dwell in fear, you're asking for more things to fear. When you dwell in lack, you're asking for more things to fear. When you dwell in lack, you're asking for more experiences of lack. When you dwell in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you're asking for the manifestation of that wish. It's law. It's absolute. It's impersonal. And once you understand it, you hold a power that nothing external can take from you. Now, I need to take you deeper into how I personally came to teach this prayer to the world, because there's a story here that will help you understand why I'm so certain this works. After my own transformation, after I had tested these principles in my own life and watched them work with scientific precision, I began to share them, quietly at first, with friends, with people who came to me with their problems, and the results were so immediate, so undeniable, that word began to spread. People started showing up at my door. Strangers, desperate people, sick people, broken people, and I taught them this simple 5-minute prayer. I taught them this simple 5-minute prayer. I taught them how to relax, how to imagine, how to feel, and I watched miracles happen. Not religious miracles in the sense of supernatural interventions that break natural law, but miracles in the sense of natural law, working at a level most people never access. I watched a woman with a tumor that doctors said was inoperable practice this prayer for 2 weeks, imagining herself healthy, feeling herself healthy, thanking God for her perfect health. 2 weeks. She went back to the hospital for what was supposed to be a final scan before they sent her home to die. The tumor was gone, completely gone. The doctors had no explanation. They used words like spontaneous remission and medical anomaly, but I knew exactly what had happened. She had impressed her subconscious mind with the image and feeling of perfect health, and her subconscious mind with the image and feeling of perfect health, and her subconscious, which controls every cell and function of her body, had brought that image into physical reality. I watched a man on the brink of bankruptcy, about to lose his business that he had spent 20 years building, practice this prayer. He didn't pray for specific clients or specific amounts of money. He simply imagined and felt what it would be like to be financially secure, to have his business thriving, to feel the deep peace that comes with abundance. Within a month, 3 major contracts came to him seemingly out of nowhere. Clients he had pitched to years ago and forgotten about suddenly called him. Opportunities that had seemed closed suddenly opened. His business didn't just survive, it flourished. Did he get lucky? No. He aligned his consciousness with prosperity, and prosperity flowed to him because that's how the law works. I watched a woman who had been alone for years, who had convinced herself she was unlovable, practice this prayer. She was unlovable, practice this prayer. She imagined herself loved. She felt herself cherished. She lived in the feeling of being in a beautiful, healthy relationship. And within weeks, not months, not years, she met someone. But here's what's even more important. She had changed. Her energy had changed. Her energy had changed. The way she carried herself had changed. She was no longer emanating desperation and lack. She had, through the consistent practice of embodying her desired state, actually become a different person internally. And that internal shift created the external change. Within 3 months, she met someone. But here's what fascinated me most about her story. She told me she almost didn't recognize the moment when it happened. She was at a bookstore, completely absorbed in browsing, not looking for anyone, not seeking anything, and someone approached her. Not because she was trying to attract them, but because she was trying to attract them, but because she had become attractive in the truest sense of the word. She was radiating something real. This is what I want you to understand deeply. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you practice feeling fulfilled you're literally impressing that state upon your subconscious. And your subconscious mind is the builder of your reality. It works tirelessly day and night to bring your outer world into alignment with your inner convictions. But most people do the opposite. They say, I'll feel happy when I get the relationship. I'll feel successful when I get the promotion. I'll feel successful when I get the promotion. I'll feel worthy when I lose the weight. They're waiting for the external to change so they can feel different internally. This is backward. This is backward. This is why they stay stuck for years, sometimes decades. The law works in reverse to how most people think. You must feel it first. You must feel it first. You must become it internally before you can experience it externally. This isn't wishful thinking, this is understanding how consciousness creates reality. I've seen this principle proven thousands of times. A man came to me once, struggling financially, buried in debt. Every morning he woke up thinking about what he lacked. His first thoughts were of bills, obligations, insufficiency. I asked him a simple question. How would you feel if your financial situation were resolved right now? If you woke up tomorrow with complete financial freedom, what would be your first feeling? He sat quietly for a moment, then said, relief, peace, gratitude. Then that, I told him, is your practice. Every morning before you open your eyes, before you check your bank account or think about your bills, you spend 5 minutes feeling that relief, that peace, that gratitude. You make it real in your inner world first. He looked skeptical. That's it? That's everything, I said. You think it's simple, and it is, but simple doesn't mean easy. Most people can't do it because they're so convinced of their problems that they won't dare imagine their solution. They think imagining money when they don't have it is foolish. But I'll tell you what's foolish: spending every waking moment imagining poverty when you want wealth. He started that practice. Every morning, 5 minutes of feeling what it would be like to have that burden lifted. Not thinking about it. Feeling it. There's a world of difference. 3 weeks later, he got a call. An old colleague from years back, someone he'd lost touch with, reached out about a consulting opportunity. It wasn't a lottery win. It wasn't magic. It was a door opening, and he walked through it. Within 2 months, he had steady income again. Within 6, he'd not only caught up on his mortgage, but had savings he hadn't seen in years. When he thanked me, I told him the same thing I'm telling you now. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You did this. You changed the inner conversation. You stopped being a victim of circumstances and became the architect of your experience. You see, your subconscious doesn't debate with you. It doesn't argue about whether something is possible or probable. It simply accepts what you consistently feel and believe, and then it goes to work making your outer world match your inner world. That's why 2 people can go through identical circumstances: job loss, divorce, illness, and one emerges transformed while the other remains trapped. Same situation, different inner conversation, different assumption about what's possible. Most people are walking around having the same mental argument with life they've been having for decades. Why me? Why is it so hard? Why do good things happen to everyone else? And the universe, faithful servant that it is, says, you're absolutely right. Let me show you more evidence of exactly that. But when you dare to assume something different, when you persist in a new inner state despite contrary evidence, everything begins to reorganize itself around that assumption. I want you to understand something crucial. The law doesn't care about your circumstances. It doesn't care about your circumstances. It doesn't care about your bank account, your education, your past failures, or what anyone has told you about your limitations. The law responds to one thing and one thing only: the state you occupy within yourself. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me years ago. She was in her late 50s, had been working the same job for decades, convinced that her life had already been written. Dr. Murphy, she said, I'm too old to change anything now. This is just who I am. I asked her a simple question. Who told you that you're too old? She looked at me, confused. Well, everyone knows that after a certain age. Everyone knows that after a certain age. I interrupted. Or is it that you've accepted that as truth, and now you're looking for evidence to support it? You see, she had built an entire identity around limitation, and the universe, which has no opinion about what you deserve or don't deserve, simply reflected that identity back to her in 1,000 different ways. I gave her one instruction. For the next 30 days, before you fall asleep each night, I want you to feel yourself as the woman who is exactly where she wants to be. Don't visualize some distant fantasy. Feel it as present reality. Feel the satisfaction, feel the fulfillment, feel what it's like to be her now. She resisted at first. But I don't know what that feels like, she protested. Then make it up, I told her. Your imagination is the greatest gift you possess. Use it. 3 months later, she called me. Her voice was different, lighter, animated. Opportunities had appeared that shouldn't have been possible at her age. A promotion she hadn't even applied for. New relationships. A sense of vitality she thought she'd lost forever. What happened? She asked me, almost breathless with wonder. Nothing happened. Everything happened. She changed her inner state and reality rearranged itself to match. This is how creation works. Not through force, not through manipulation, through alignment. You don't create by pushing against what is. You create by pushing against what is. You create by becoming what you desire to be, right now, in consciousness. And then the outer world, which is nothing but a mirror, reflects that back to you. Let me be clear about something that confuses many people. When I say assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, I'm not talking about pretending. I'm not asking you to fake happiness or put on a mask of positivity while your heart is heavy with doubt. I'm talking about something far more profound. I'm talking about a shift in identity. When you truly assume your desire is fulfilled, you don't walk around trying to convince yourself. You don't need affirmations repeated 1,000 times to drown out your disbelief. You simply know, the way you know your own name, the way you know your own name, the way you know the sun will rise tomorrow. This knowing is quiet. It's certain. It requires no defense, no justification, no external proof. And here's what happens when you reach that state. You stop looking for it. You stop checking the mailbox every hour. You stop refreshing your email obsessively. You stop asking everyone around you, do you think it'll happen? Because it's already done in consciousness. And consciousness is the only reality. Think of a seed planted in dark soil. Does it frantically search for evidence that it will become a tree? Does it panic when it can't see the sunlight? No. It simply unfolds according to its nature, trusting the intelligence within it. You are that seed. Your desire, once planted in consciousness and felt as real, will unfold in the three-dimensional world, not because you forced it, not because you manipulated circumstances, but because that is the law. The outer world has no choice but to conform. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but Joseph, I've tried this, I've visualized, I've affirmed, and nothing happened. Let me ask you something. Did you really assume it was done? Or did you hope it would be done? Did you hope it would be done? Did you wish it might be done? Did you try very hard to make yourself believe it could be done? There's a world of difference between those states. Hope is future-oriented. It says, maybe one day. Assumption is present tense. It says, it is done. When you hope, you're affirming lack. When you assume, you're claiming fulfillment. Let me give you a real-world example of this difference. A woman once came to me and said, Dr. Murphy, I've been hoping to meet the right person for 3 years. I've prayed, I've visualized, but nothing happens. I asked her, when you pray, what do you say? She replied, I say, I hope I find someone. I hope God sends me the right person. I told her, there's your problem. Hope is a beggar's word. You're treating your desire like a distant possibility instead of a present reality. I instructed her to change her inner conversation completely. Instead of hoping, she was to assume. Every night before sleep, she was to assume. Every night before sleep, she was to feel what it would be like to be happily married. Not imagine it happening someday, but feel it as already true now. She was to hear the words, I love you. She was to feel the ring on her finger. She was to feel the ring on her finger. She was to sense the warmth of companionship as a present fact. Within 2 months, She met someone. Within 6 months, she was engaged. What changed? Not the outside world. Her inner state changed first. She stopped hoping and started assuming. Here's what most people don't understand. Assumption creates the very circumstances that match it. When you assume you are prosperous, you begin to think prosperous thoughts. You begin to think prosperous thoughts. You begin to act from prosperity. You carry yourself differently. You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. And the world responds to what you're assuming to be true about yourself. This isn't magic. This is law. Your assumptions harden into fact because your subconscious mind accepts your dominant feeling as instruction. When you assume wealth, your subconscious goes to work to manifest wealth. When you assume health, your subconscious activates healing. But when you merely hope, your subconscious activates healing. But when you merely hope, your subconscious receives a confused message. It hears, I want this, but I don't have it. I need this, but it's not here. And so it creates more of that, more wanting, more needing, more absence. Assumption is the shortcut to manifestation because it bypasses the gap between desire and fulfillment. It doesn't wait for evidence. It creates evidence. Think about this. Every fact in your life right now was once an assumption. Your current job, your relationships, your income level, they all began as assumptions you held about yourself and your world. Your bank account reflects your assumption about what you deserve to earn. Your relationships mirror your assumption about what you deserve to receive. Your health demonstrates your assumption about your body's capabilities. This is why changing your assumptions is so powerful and why it requires such deliberate practice. You're not just adopting positive thoughts. You're restructuring the foundation upon which your entire reality is built. Let me share something I witnessed that illustrates this perfectly. I once counseled a woman who came to me with what she called the worst luck in the world. Every job she started, she'd get fired within months. Every relationship abandoned. Every relationship abandoned. Every opportunity snatched away at the last moment. I'm cursed, she told me with absolute conviction. And you know what? She was right. Not because any external force was working against her, but because any external force was working against her, but because her assumption was creating exactly what she expected. When I asked her to describe what happens at these jobs, the pattern became obvious. I know they're going to fire me, she said. So I start noticing all the little signs, the way my boss looks at me, the tone in their emails. I can feel it coming. She wasn't predicting the future. She was creating it. Her assumption made her hypervigilant for any sign of rejection. That hypervigilance changed her behavior. She became tentative, defensive, withdrawn. Her co-workers sensed something off. Her performance suffered. Eventually she'd be let go, confirming her assumption and strengthening it for the next cycle. We worked together to identify and challenge this core assumption. It wasn't easy. She had decades of evidence supporting her belief. But we started small. Before her next job, she practiced a new assumption. I am valued wherever I work. People appreciate my contributions. Within 2 weeks, she noticed something remarkable. The same co-workers who had ignored her began asking for her input. Her manager complimented her work in a team meeting. Nothing in her external behavior had changed dramatically, but everything in her internal world had shifted. She stopped walking into that office expecting to be invisible, and so she stopped being invisible, This is the mechanism at work. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate whether your assumption is reasonable or justified. It simply accepts what you persistently feel to be true and then orchestrates your perceptions, your behaviors, your energy, and even the responses you evoke from others to match that inner conviction. You've experienced this yourself, haven't you? Think about a time when you walked into a situation absolutely certain of a negative outcome. Maybe you thought, this is going to be awkward, or they're not going to like me, or this won't work. And then, almost like magic, your prediction came true. But it wasn't magic. It was your assumption hardening into experience. The reverse is equally true. When you've entered situations with quiet confidence, with an inner knowing that things would work out, they often did. Not because you were lucky, but because your assumption shaped your perception, your body language, your tone of voice, the risks you were willing to take. Here's what most people miss. They think confidence comes after success. They believe, once I achieve this, then I'll feel confident. But that's backwards. Confidence is the assumption that precedes and creates the success. You must feel successful before the evidence arrives. You must assume the state of the person who already has what you desire. This isn't about arrogance or delusion. It's about arrogance or delusion. It's about understanding that your feelings create your reality, not the other way around. The world you see is not the cause of what you feel. What you feel is the cause of the world you see. Let me give you another example, this time from the realm of health. A man once told me he'd been diagnosed with a chronic condition. Every doctor visit reinforced the same story. This is permanent. You'll have to manage it forever. There's no cure. And for years he lived exactly that reality. Then something shifted. He began to question the assumption, not the diagnosis itself, but the permanence of it. He started to imagine, just for a few minutes each day, what it would feel like to be completely well. He didn't fight the thought that came up telling him it was impossible. He simply redirected his attention back to the feeling of wellness, back to the image of himself moving freely, breathing deeply, living fully. Within weeks, something shifted, not overnight, not dramatically, but the pain began to ease. The inflammation reduced. The doctors were baffled, but the man wasn't surprised. He had changed the inner conversation, and the body, always listening, always obedient, responded in kind. Now, I want you to understand something crucial here. This wasn't positive thinking. This wasn't positive thinking. This wasn't denial. This was a deliberate rewriting of the subconscious script. The man didn't pretend he wasn't sick. He simply stopped identifying with sickness as his permanent state. He stopped feeding the mental image of himself as broken. You see, most people, when they receive a diagnosis, they do the opposite. They research it obsessively. They join support groups centered entirely around the condition. They introduce themselves by their illness. I'm diabetic. I'm depressed. I'm an insomniac. They make the condition their identity, and the subconscious mind, which cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one, accepts this identity completely. It says, all right, if this is who we are, then let me make sure the body reflects that. And so the condition persists or worsens, not because it must, but because the inner blueprint demands it. This is why affirmations alone often fail. Because if you're saying I am healthy, while simultaneously picturing yourself as sick, while feeling the fear of illness, while identifying deeply with your diagnosis, the subconscious accepts the feeling and the image, not the words. Words without corresponding feeling are like seeds planted in concrete. They don't take root. What actually works is this. You must feel the reality of health before the body shows it. You must feel the reality of health before the body shows it. You must inhabit the consciousness of a healthy person while the symptoms may still be present. This requires tremendous mental discipline. It requires you to stop monitoring every sensation for evidence of illness. Most people do what I call symptom surveillance. Every morning they wake up and immediately scan their body. Is the pain still there? Has it gotten worse? Is it better? And with each scan, they're affirming the reality of the condition. They're affirming the reality of the condition. They're keeping it alive with their attention. I'm going to be direct with you. Your body responds to what your mind accepts as true. If you constantly check for symptoms, you're telling your subconscious, this illness is real and important. Keep it present in my experience. You're feeding the very thing you want to eliminate. Think about when you were completely absorbed in something you loved, a conversation with a dear friend, a creative project, a beautiful sunset. In those moments, did you notice your pain? Did you feel your anxiety? Most likely not. Your attention was elsewhere, and therefore the subconscious wasn't manifesting those symptoms as prominently. This isn't about ignoring serious medical issues. I want to be clear about that. If you have a condition that requires medical attention, by all means, work with healthcare professionals. But even while receiving treatment, your mental attitude determines whether you're working with the healing process or against it. The question becomes, how do I stop this constant monitoring? How do I stop this constant monitoring? How do I withdraw my attention from symptoms without feeling like I'm being irresponsible? The answer is redirection and substitution. You cannot simply empty your mind of thoughts about illness. Nature abhors a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. You must fill your consciousness with thoughts of health, vitality, and wholeness. This means developing what I call a health identity. You begin to see yourself fundamentally as a healthy person. When someone asks how you are, you don't launch into a detailed description of your symptoms. You say, I'm well, thank you. and you mean it at the level of your true spiritual identity. You might think, but isn't that lying? If I have symptoms, shouldn't I acknowledge them? Here's the truth. Your symptoms are temporary manifestations. Your true nature, your spiritual essence is perfect, whole and complete. When you identify with that truth rather than temporary conditions, you align yourself with healing power. Think of it this way: when you look in a mirror and see a distorted reflection, you don't try to fix the mirror by treating the reflection. You don't try to fix the mirror by treating the reflection. You adjust the mirror itself, or you step into better light. Your consciousness is that mirror. Your thoughts are the angle at which it's held. When you change your mental position, the reflection changes automatically. I've worked with countless individuals who cured themselves of so-called incurable conditions. What did they do differently? They stopped fighting the disease and started identifying with health. They stopped fighting the disease and started identifying with health. My diabetes, my condition, as if these things were permanent possessions. Instead, they began affirming, health is my true nature. Vitality flows through me now. Every cell in my body is being renewed. One woman came to me after years of chronic pain. Doctors had given her every diagnosis, every pill, every treatment. Nothing worked. I asked her one question: who would you be without this pain? She looked startled. No one had ever asked her to imagine herself as healthy. She had become so identified with suffering that she didn't know who she'd be without it. We worked together for weeks, not on the pain, on her self-concept. She began to visualize herself moving freely, laughing without wincing, sleeping peacefully through the night. She stopped talking about her pain to everyone she met. She stopped talking about her pain to everyone she met. She stopped checking her symptoms every hour. Instead, she filled her mind with images of wholeness. Within 3 months, the pain that had plagued her for a decade simply dissolved. Her doctors were amazed, but I wasn't. I've seen this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times. When you change your inner conversation, your outer conditions must follow. The subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate whether your assumptions are reasonable or unreasonable. It simply accepts the dominant mental attitude you habitually maintain and proceeds to externalize it in your experience. This is why two people can work in the same office, live in the same neighborhood, even come from the same family, and yet have completely different experiences of life. One sees opportunity everywhere. The other sees only obstacles. One attracts helpful people. The other seems to encounter resistance at every turn. What's the difference? It's not luck. It's not fate. It's the habitual inner conversation each person maintains about themselves and their world. I once counseled a woman who insisted that everyone she worked with was hostile toward her. She would come to me week after week with new examples of how her colleagues were undermining her, spreading rumors, excluding her from important meetings. I asked her a simple question: before you walk into your office each morning, what are you saying to yourself? She looked startled. I don't know. I suppose I'm thinking about how difficult they all are. And when you see a group of them talking, what do you assume they're saying? Probably talking about me, she admitted. There it was. Her inner conversation was one of suspicion and defensiveness. She entered every interaction expecting hostility, and through the subtle channels of tone, body language, and attitude, she was actually eliciting the very behavior she feared. I gave her a specific assignment. For 30 days she was to change her inner conversation completely. Before entering the office, she would say to herself, I work with supportive, friendly people who respect me. When she saw colleagues talking, she would assume they were discussing work matters that had nothing to do with her. When someone spoke to her, she would listen for goodwill rather than criticism. She would listen for goodwill rather than criticism. She was skeptical, but desperate enough to try. Within 2 weeks, her entire experience at work had shifted. A colleague invited her to lunch. Another asked for her opinion on a project. The atmosphere that had felt so hostile began to feel neutral, then actually pleasant. Had her co-workers changed? No. She had changed her inner conversation, and her changed her inner conversation, and her changed perception altered her behavior, which in turn altered how others responded to her. This is the foundation of all lasting change. You cannot simultaneously hold a conversation of poverty and manifest abundance. You cannot whisper defeat to yourself and walk in victory. The law is precise. Your habitual internal dialogue creates the lens through which you perceive reality, and that perception becomes your experience. Now, I want you to understand something profound about the nature of these conversations. They are not merely thoughts floating through consciousness. They are creative forces. Every word you speak silently to yourself carries vibrational energy. These vibrations sink into your subconscious mind, where they become the patterns that shape your automatic responses, your habits, your very character. Consider the person who constantly tells themselves, "I never have enough time." This becomes their truth. They rush, they panic, they create chaos. Meanwhile, someone else with the identical schedule tells themselves, "I have all the time I need to accomplish what matters." They move with calm efficiency. They prioritize naturally. The clock shows the same hours for both, but their inner conversations create entirely different experiences of time itself. This is why I emphasize that you must become the guardian of your inner speech. You would not invite a thief into your home and give him access to your valuables. Why then do you permit destructive conversations to roam freely through the house of your mind, stealing your peace, your health, your prosperity? The transformation begins when you catch yourself. You are speaking to yourself right now as you listen to these words. What is the nature of that conversation? Is it agreement, skepticism, hope, fear? Whatever it is, recognize that this is the creative power at work. I once counseled a young man who came to me in desperation. He was brilliant, educated, talented, yet he had failed at every business venture he attempted. As we talked, the cause became crystal clear. His internal dialogue was poisoned by his father's voice from childhood, constantly saying, "You'll never amount to anything. You're a dreamer, not a doer." Though his father had been gone for years, the young man continued the conversation. Every time he approached a decision, he heard those words. Every setback confirmed them. He was living in a mental prison built of old conversations. I gave him a simple practice. Every morning and evening he was to stand before a mirror and declare aloud, "I am successful in all my undertakings. Everything I touch prospers and succeeds." At first it felt false to him. His inner voice rebelled, but he persisted. Within 3 months his entire demeanor had changed. Within 6 months he launched a business that thrived. The external circumstances hadn't changed. First his inner conversation changed, and the outer world rearranged itself to match. The transformation was so profound that even skeptics in his life began to ask what had happened. And do you know what he told them? "I simply stopped rehearsing the wrong lines." You see, most people think that changing your life requires monumental effort, dramatic external shifts, or lucky breaks, but the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Your life changes the moment your inner dialogue changes, the moment your inner dialogue changes. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, right now. I want you to understand something crucial. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't say, "Well, that's not realistic," or "Let me check the facts first." It simply accepts what you persistently impress upon it through your thoughts and feelings. This is both your greatest vulnerability and your supreme power. When you constantly tell yourself, "I can't afford this," your subconscious accepts that as an instruction. It then works tirelessly to prove you right. It will direct your attention toward evidence of lack. It will cause you to overlook opportunities, and it will magnify every setback as confirmation of your financial limitations. But reverse the inner dialogue, truly reverse it, with feeling and conviction, and watch what happens. When you begin affirming, "Money flows to me easily and naturally," your subconscious accepts this too. It begins to heighten your awareness of opportunities. It draws ideas from the infinite intelligence within you. It arranges seeming coincidences that align with your new inner conviction. I knew a woman who applied this principle to her health. For years she had described herself as sickly and weak. These weren't just casual comments, they were her identity. Every conversation somehow circled back to her ailments. Her inner dialogue was a constant stream of health complaints, even when she was alone. I asked her a simple question: "If you were in perfect health, how would you speak to yourself?" She thought for a moment and said, "I suppose I wouldn't think about my body much at all. I just feel grateful and energetic." "Then begin there," I told her. "Speak to yourself as the healthy person you wish to become." Within 2 weeks, she reported a noticeable shift in her energy. Within 2 months, her symptoms had diminished significantly. Her doctor was astonished, but I was not. I had seen this pattern repeat itself countless times. Your subconscious does not argue with you. It does not question whether you deserve what you claim. It simply accepts the dominant mental attitude you hold and works tirelessly to make it real. This is why affirmations must be crafted with precision and spoken with conviction. They are not wishful thinking. They are not wishful thinking. They are authoritative declarations of truth planted in the fertile soil of your deeper mind. Let me share with you the proper structure of a transformative affirmation. It must be stated in the present tense, as though the desired condition already exists. It must be positive, never focusing on what you wish to avoid, but always on what you wish to experience, and it must evoke feeling, not merely intellectual agreement. For example, if you seek financial abundance, do not say, "I will be wealthy someday." That places your good in a perpetually distant future. Instead, declare with quiet confidence, "I am now surrounded by abundance. Money flows to me easily and constantly. I am grateful for my prosperity." Feel the difference. The first statement keeps you waiting. The second statement claims your good now, in this present moment. When you speak such words, your subconscious begins immediately to align your thoughts, actions, and circumstances with that declared reality. Opportunities you would have overlooked suddenly become visible. People who can assist you appear seemingly by chance. Ideas spring into your awareness at just the right moment. This is not magic. This is not magic. This is law. It is the law of mental causation operating with mathematical precision in your life. Now, some will ask, "But Dr. Murphy, how long must I affirm before I see results?" And my answer is always the same. You must persist until the new belief becomes natural to you, until it no longer feels like pretending but like recognizing what is true. For some, this happens in days. For others, it may take weeks or months. The timing depends entirely on how deeply the old belief is rooted and how consistently you apply the new one. But here's the crucial point. You must remain faithful to the new impression. You cannot plant a seed and then dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You cannot affirm health while constantly dwelling on symptoms. You cannot claim abundance while rehearsing your lack. This is where most people stumble. They do the technique once or twice with enthusiasm, and when they don't see immediate results, they return to their old pattern of thinking. It's like taking one step forward and two steps back. The subconscious mind reads this inconsistency as doubt, and doubt is the great saboteur of manifestation. I want you to understand something fundamental about faith. Real faith is not blind belief. It's not blind belief. It's not wishful thinking or fantasy. Faith in the psychological sense is the steady acceptance of an idea as true. It's the quiet knowing that what you've impressed upon your subconscious must come forth. It's not dramatic. It's not dramatic. It's not emotional. It's simply the absence of doubt. When you truly believe something, you don't worry about it. When you truly believe something, you don't worry about it. You don't seek constant reassurance. You know it the way you know the sun will rise tomorrow. You may not see it yet, but you trust the law that governs its appearance. This kind of faith comes from understanding how the mind works. When you realize that your subconscious is impersonal, that it accepts what you impress upon it without judgment or resistance, you stop forcing and start allowing. You stop forcing and start allowing. You stop anxiously checking for results and start living from the assumption that your desire is already accomplished. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you're working to overcome a health challenge. Every morning you do your mental work. You feel yourself whole, vibrant, healthy. You give thanks for your perfect body. But then throughout the day, every time you feel a symptom, you react with fear. You tell your friends about your condition. You research worst-case scenarios. You identify yourself as sick. What have you done? You've neutralized your morning work. You've watered the weed while trying to grow the flower. Your subconscious receives mixed signals, and mixed signals, and mixed signals produce mixed results, or often no results at all. The alternative is this. Do your mental work with feeling and conviction, then go about your day with calm assurance. When symptoms arise, don't deny their temporary appearance, but don't give them power. Quietly redirect your mind back to your ideal. Affirm silently, "This too shall pass. I am becoming whole." Then release it and move on. The truth is, your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Well, I'll think about it." It simply accepts what you consistently feel to be true. This is why persistence matters more than intensity. A gentle, repeated whisper of truth will reshape your inner world far more effectively than a single burst of desperate affirmation. I've watched people try to force their way into prosperity, into health, into love. They clench their fists and shout affirmations like battle cries, and yet nothing changes. Why? Because beneath the shouting is doubt. Beneath the force is fear. The subconscious feels the fear, not the words. It responds to the emotional conviction, not the volume. So when you plant your new belief, do it with quiet confidence. Feel it as already established. Don't beg, don't demand, simply know. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you've been struggling with financial lack. Every time you open your wallet, you feel that familiar tightness in your chest. Bills pile up. Opportunities seem to slip through your fingers. Now, you decide to change this pattern. You don't start by pretending you're a millionaire. That would feel like a lie, and your subconscious would reject it instantly. Instead, you begin with a truth you can accept. I am now opening my mind to greater financial flow. Or perhaps, money comes to me in expected and unexpected ways. You repeat this quietly morning and evening until it begins to feel natural. Then, here's the crucial part: you watch for small evidence. Maybe someone repays a debt you'd forgotten about. Maybe someone repays a debt you'd forgotten about. Maybe you find a $20 bill in an old coat pocket. These aren't coincidences. They're the first shoots of your new mental garden breaking through the soil. Acknowledge them. Feel grateful for them. This tells your subconscious, yes, this is real. More of this, please. Over time, the evidence grows. The opportunities multiply. What seemed impossible becomes inevitable. What seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Not because you forced anything, but because you aligned your inner conviction with your outer desire. This is thealchemy of belief. This is thealchemy of belief. This is how thought becomes thing. But let me warn you about something that trips up many seekers on this path: the temptation to monitor results obsessively. You plant the seed, then you dig it up every day to see if it's growing. Is it working yet? Why don't I see changes? Maybe I'm doing it wrong. This constant checking is like standing over a pot of water, demanding that it boil faster. Your anxiety doesn't speed the process, it disrupts it. Trust takes time to develop. New neural pathways don't form overnight. Your subconscious needs space to work without your conscious mind hovering over it like a nervous supervisor. Think of it this way: when you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every hour to check if it's growing. That constant interference would actually damage the delicate sprouting process happening beneath the soil. Your subconscious mind works the same way. Once you've planted your affirmation, your desire, your new belief, let it germinate in the darkness of your inner world. This is why I always recommend what I call the plant and release method. You do your mental work with feeling and conviction, then you let it go. You go about your day. You focus on other things. You trust that the intelligence within you is now reorganizing your circumstances to match your inner conviction. Many people make the mistake of obsessing. They affirm something once, then spend the next 23 hours worrying whether it's working. This is like pressing the elevator button repeatedly. It doesn't make it arrive any faster, and it actually reveals your lack of faith in the mechanism. Your subconscious responds to your emotional state. When you're relaxed and confident, when you have that quiet knowing that what you've claimed is already yours in consciousness, you're broadcasting the right frequency. When you're anxious and checking constantly for results, you're actually affirming the opposite, that it hasn't happened yet, that you're still separate from your desire. I've watched this pattern countless times. Someone will come to me and say, I've been affirming for 3 days and nothing has changed. 3 days. As if the patterns of a lifetime should dissolve in 72 hours, as if the subconscious operates on our impatient timeline. Here's what actually happens. The moment you begin impressing your subconscious with a new idea, change begins. But it begins invisibly. Circumstances start shifting. People you need to meet start moving toward you. Opportunities begin aligning. None of this is visible to your conscious awareness at first, but it's happening. It's like turning a massive ship. When the captain turns the wheel, the ship doesn't pivot instantly. There's a delay. The rudder redirects the water flow, which gradually changes the vessel's direction. From the deck, it might not even feel like anything is happening. But the ship is turning. Your life is that ship is turning. Your life is that ship. Your affirmation is the turning of the wheel. Now you must allow the turning to complete itself without panicking and jerking the wheel in the opposite direction every few minutes. The turning takes time because your subconscious mind is not a light switch. It's more like an ocean liner changing course. There's tremendous momentum in your current direction, momentum built up over years, perhaps decades, of thinking in a particular way. And here's what most people don't understand. During that turning period, you may still see evidence of your old direction. The ship is turning, but for several minutes it still appears to be heading toward the same horizon. Your bank account may still show the same balance. Your body may still carry the same symptoms. Your circumstances may still reflect the old pattern. This is the critical moment. This is the critical moment. This is where most people abandon their practice. They say, "You see, I knew this wouldn't work. I've been affirming for 3 days and nothing has changed." 3 days. They expect the mental equivalent of decades to dissolve in 72 hours. Would you plant a seed in your garden on Monday and return on Wednesday with a shovel, ready to dig it up in disgust because you don't see a full-grown tree? Of course not. You understand that growth has seasons. Germination happens in darkness, beneath the soil, invisible to your eye. But it is asterisk happening. Your subconscious mind works the same way. When you plant a new belief through repetition and feeling, there is a gestation period. There is a gestation period. The seed is splitting open in the dark soil of your deeper mind. Roots are forming. The transformation has begun, even though you cannot yet see the evidence with your physical eyes. I want you to understand something profound. The lag between impression and expression is actually a mercy. Imagine if every passing thought manifested instantly. Every moment of doubt, every flash of fear, every negative image would materialize immediately. Your life would be chaos. The time delay is a buffer. It gives you the opportunity to become consistent, to establish a dominant mental attitude, to impress your subconscious deeply enough that the new pattern becomes your automatic response. So what do you do during this waiting period? You persist. You continue your practice with the calm assurance that the law is working. You don't frantically search for evidence. You don't test it every hour like a child checking if the cookies are done. You go about your daily life with a quiet inner knowing. This is the foundation of faith, not blind hope, not wishful thinking, but a settled conviction that what you've accepted in consciousness must express in form. Think of it like planting a seed in fertile soil. Once the seed is in the ground, you don't dig it up every morning to see if it's sprouting. You don't pace back and forth, wringing your hands, wondering if the laws of nature still work. You water it, you give it sunlight, and you trust the process. The seed contains within itself everything needed to become the plant. Your part is simply to provide the right conditions and then allow nature to take its course. Your mental seed, your accepted idea, works exactly the same way. Once impressed upon your subconscious mind, it has everything it needs to manifest. It doesn't require your constant supervision. It doesn't need your anxiety or your doubt. In fact, those very emotions are like pouring acid on tender roots. They corrupt the process. I've seen people sabotage their own demonstrations 1,000 times over through this very mistake. They do the inner work beautifully. They visualize clearly, feel deeply, accept completely. And then they walk out into their day and spend every waking moment questioning whether it's working. They look for signs. They analyze every small event for hidden meanings. They oscillate between hope and despair based on external circumstances that haven't even caught up with their new internal state yet. This is not faith. This is torture. True faith is a restful state. It's the calm assurance that comes from understanding how this law works. You've set the cause in motion, the effect must follow. Not because you hope it will, not because you deserve it, but because that's simply how consciousness operates. Cause and effect, seed and harvest, impression and expression. When you truly understand this, you stop checking, you stop testing, you stop looking for proof every 5 minutes. Instead, you live from the assumption that it's already done. You make decisions from that place. You speak from that place. You move through your world as the person who already has what you've claimed in consciousness. And what happens when you live from that place? The external world begins to shift, not because you're forcing it, not because you're manipulating circumstances, but because you've changed the fundamental vibration you're broadcasting into the creative medium of consciousness. Think about it this way: a radio station doesn't chase after radios to force them to play its signal. It simply broadcasts at a certain frequency, and every radio tuned to that frequency receives it automatically. You are a broadcasting station. Your dominant mental attitude is your frequency, and the universe, this infinite intelligence that surrounds you and flows through you, responds to the frequency you're emitting. When you walk into a room feeling lack, what do you attract? More experiences that confirm lack. When you enter the same room feeling abundant, prosperous, already blessed, what changes? Everything. The very same people respond to you differently. Opportunities that were invisible suddenly become visible, suddenly become visible. Doors that seemed locked swing open with ease. This isn't magic. This isn't wishful thinking. This is law. This is the way consciousness operates. I've counseled people who transformed their entire financial situation not by working harder, but by changing their inner conviction about money. One man came to me deeply in debt, stressed, unable to sleep at night. I asked him a simple question. When you think about money, what do you feel? Fear, he said. Anxiety. Never enough. And that, I told him, is what you're impressing upon your subconscious mind day after day. That's a mold you're pouring your mental energy into. You're creating more of what you fear. I taught him to change his inner conversation. Before sleep each night, instead of rehearsing his debts and worries, he began to feel grateful. He imagined his bills paid. He felt the relief, the freedom, the joy of financial security. He impressed upon his subconscious mind the feeling of wealth, not the fear of poverty. Within 6 months, his circumstances had completely transformed. New income streams appeared. Unexpected checks arrived. Solutions to problems that seemed impossible suddenly became obvious. Did the universe magically hand him money? No. His consciousness changed, and when consciousness changed, and when consciousness changes, conditions must follow. This is the principle that governs all manifestation. You don't chase the thing. You become the person who already has it. You embody the state. You wear the feeling like a garment, and then almost as if by magic, though it's not magic at all, the outer world rearranges itself to match your inner conviction. Now, I want to address something that trips people up constantly. They ask me, Dr. Murphy, how long will this take? When will I see results? And I tell them, the moment you ask that question, you've stepped out of the state. Because the person who already has what they desire doesn't wonder when it will arrive. They know it's already theirs. Time is a construct of the conscious mind. In consciousness, in imagination, everything exists now. When you imagine yourself as you wish to be, you're not creating something in the future, you're claiming something in the future, you're claiming something that exists in this very moment in the realm of consciousness. The only reason it hasn't appeared in your physical reality yet is because you keep interrupting the process with doubt, with questioning, with looking at current circumstances and declaring them more real than your imagination. Let me share something with you that will change how you approach this work. Every single time you return to your assumption, every time you return to your assumption, every time you feel the reality of your wish fulfilled, you are watering the seed. You don't plant a seed and then dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You plant it, you water it, and you trust the process. Your imagination is the seed. Your feeling is the water. Your feeling is the water. Your faith is the soil. And the harvest is inevitable if you don't uproot it with doubt. I've seen people transform their entire lives in days. I've seen others take months. The difference is never in the technique, it's in the consistency of their assumption. It's in their willingness to remain faithful to the invisible reality until it becomes visible reality, until it becomes visible. You want to know the real secret? Stop treating your desire as something separate from you. Stop putting it on a pedestal. Stop putting it on a pedestal. Stop begging for it. It's already yours. The only question is, are you going to accept it? Are you going to accept it? Are you going to live from that acceptance? Think about this carefully. Everything you see around you right now, every circumstance, every relationship, every limitation exists because you have accepted it as true. And here's what most people never realize. Acceptance is not a one-time decision. It's a moment-by-moment choice. Right now, in this very instant, you are either accepting limitation or accepting possibility. You're either accepting limitation or accepting possibility. You're either accepting lack or accepting abundance. You're either accepting fear or accepting faith. The subconscious doesn't debate. It doesn't argue. It doesn't argue. It simply takes what you accept and makes it your reality. I've watched people transform their entire lives by changing one single acceptance. A woman came to me years ago, completely broke, drowning in debt, convinced that poverty was her destiny. She had accepted it so completely that she could recite all the reasons why she would always struggle. Her parents were poor. She didn't have the right education. The economy was bad. Other people had advantages she didn't have. Every reason was just another layer of acceptance. I asked her one question: are you willing to accept that abundance is seeking you right now? She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. The idea was so foreign to her programming that she couldn't even hold it in her mind for more than a few seconds before her old acceptances came flooding back. But slowly, with persistence, she began to practice a new acceptance. Every morning, before the old thoughts could take hold, she would say, "I accept that infinite abundance is mine now. I accept that money flows to me easily. I accept that I am worthy of wealth." Not affirmations shouted at a mirror while doubt screams underneath. True acceptance, peaceful acknowledgement, like accepting that the sun will rise. Within 3 months, everything changed. An opportunity appeared that led to another opportunity, appeared that led to another opportunity. Debts began to resolve in unexpected ways. Money started showing up from sources she never anticipated. Was it magic? No, it was law. She changed her acceptance, and the subconscious went to work creating circumstances to match that new acceptance. This is the power you're working with. This is the power you're working with. This is the mechanism that has been running your life on autopilot, creating results based on whatever you've accepted as true. And here's the beautiful part. You can change your acceptances right now, not tomorrow, not tomorrow, not when conditions are better, right now. What if you accepted, truly accepted, that your desire is already done? What if you accepted that the infinite intelligence within you knows exactly how to bring it forth? What if you accepted that you are worthy, capable, and destined for the very thing you seek? What would happen if you stopped accepting limitation and started accepting possibility? The answer is simple. Your entire world would reorganize itself around your new acceptance. This is why I say to you, stop waiting for proof and start living from certainty. Stop asking life to convince you and stop asking life to convince you, and start convincing life through your own assumption. The bridge you've been looking for isn't out there. It's within you. It's your willingness to accept as true what reason and sense deny. I have seen people transform their health when doctors gave them no hope. I have seen businesses rise from nothing when logic said it was impossible. I have seen love return when all evidence pointed to separation. And in every case, the turning point was the separation. And in every case, the turning point was the same. They stopped accepting what was and started accepting what could be. You see, your subconscious mind doesn't analyze whether your assumption is reasonable. It doesn't care if your bank account agrees or if your circumstances support it. It only knows what you persistently accept as true. Feed it limitation, and it will produce limitation. Feed it possibility, and watch how quickly your world reflects it back to you. Let me be very clear about something. This is not positive thinking. This is not positive thinking. This is not affirmation without feeling. This is not pretending everything is fine when it's falling apart. This is a complete shift in your inner stance toward life. It's accepting at the deepest level that you are not a victim of circumstance, but the creator of it. When you truly accept something, you stop fighting it. You stop fighting it. You stop resisting it. You stop needing it to be different, because in your inner world, it already is different. And that inner shift, that quiet acceptance, radiates outward and rearranges everything in its path. So I ask you now, what are you accepting about yourself today? What story are you saying yes to? Because whatever you are saying yes to, because whatever you accept, you will experience. If you accept struggle, struggle will meet you at every turn. If you accept scarcity, no amount of effort will bring abundance. But if you accept your power, your worthiness, your inevitable success, then all the forces of life will conspire to make it so. This is the law. This is how creation works. Not someday, not when you're ready. Right now, in this moment, through the simple act of acceptance. This isn't about waiting for permission from the world. It's about giving yourself permission from the world. It's about giving yourself permission, right here, right now. I've watched people spend decades preparing to feel worthy. They tell themselves, when I lose the weight, when I get the promotion, when I find the relationship, when I find the relationship, when I pay off the debt, then I'll accept myself. But that day never comes. But that day never comes. Because the goal isn't really the goal. The goal is the excuse to keep punishing yourself, to keep withholding love from the one person who needs it most, you. Your subconscious mind doesn't understand timelines. It doesn't know someday or eventually. It doesn't know someday or eventually. It only knows now. And every moment you spend rejecting yourself, you're programming it with that rejection. Every moment you spend saying, I'm not good enough yet, you're teaching it that you're not good enough yet. You're teaching it that you're not good enough. Period. But here's what changes everything. The instant you accept yourself flaws, failures, imperfections and all, you send a completely different message to your subconscious. You tell it, I am worthy of love exactly as I am. And your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It accepts this as truth and begins reorganizing your entire reality around it. I want you to feel something right now. Not think it, feel it. Place your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. That heart has been beating for you since before you took your first breath. It has never asked you to be perfect. It has never asked you to be perfect. It has never required you to earn its rhythm. It simply beats, faithfully, unconditionally, keeping you alive moment after moment after moment after moment after moment. That's what unconditional love looks like. Your own heart loves you unconditionally. Your lungs breathe for you without judgment. Your body heals your wounds without asking if you deserve healing. Nature itself has already accepted you completely. The only one withholding acceptance is you, and you can stop right now. This very moment. You don't need to wait for a crisis. You don't need to wait for a crisis. You don't need to wait for rock bottom. You don't need to wait until everything falls apart before you decide that you're worthy of peace. The permission you've been waiting for? It's already yours. It always has been. You see, most people treat inner peace like it's a luxury item, something you earn after you've checked all the boxes, after you've achieved enough, suffered enough, proved enough. They say to themselves, when I finally get that promotion, asterisk, then asterisk, I'll relax. When I finally lose the weight, asterisk, then asterisk, I'll be happy. When I finally lose the weight, asterisk, then asterisk, I'll be happy. When I finally have enough money, asterisk, then asterisk, I'll stop worrying. Because the goalpost keeps moving, the standard keeps rising, the finish line keeps shifting further away. Peace isn't a destination, it's a decision. And you can make it right now, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with whatever's in your bank account, whatever's on your bank account, whatever's on your to-do list, whatever mess is sitting in your kitchen sink. I want you to understand something fundamental. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real experience and one you vividly imagine. We've established this. But here's what's equally important. Your subconscious also doesn't know the difference between peace you've earned and peace you simply asterisk, choose asterisk. It doesn't demand credentials. It doesn't demand credentials. It doesn't check your resume. It doesn't care if you've suffered the right amount to deserve rest. When you declare peace, when you clear peace, when you claim it, when you embody it, your subconscious accepts it. And then it begins to manifest circumstances that match that inner state. This is where people get it backwards. This is where people get it backwards. They think the circumstances have to change first, and asterisk, then asterisk, they'll feel peaceful. But it works in reverse. You become peaceful first, and asterisk, then asterisk, then asterisk, your circumstances rearrange themselves to reflect that peace. I've seen this happen thousands of times. A woman who decides she's done with anxiety suddenly finds solutions appearing where there were only problems before. A man who chooses to release resentment suddenly experiences relationships healing without him having to force anything. Someone who claims inner calm discovers that the external chaos that once consumed them somehow matters less, affects them differently, or simply dissolves. This isn't magical thinking. This is how consciousness operates. Your outer world is a reflection of your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. Always has been, always will be. So when you stop the war within yourself, the wars around you lose their power. You know what happens when you finally get this. When you truly understand that consciousness is the only creator, you stop begging, you stop begging, you stop hoping, you stop wishing on stars and crossing your fingers. You start knowing, and knowing is a completely different vibration than hoping. Hope says maybe it'll happen. Knowing says it's already done. Hope looks to the future with uncertainty. Knowing rests in the present with absolute conviction. I've watched people transform their entire lives not by doing more, but by being more certain. Not by doing more, but by being more certain. Not by working harder, but by believing deeper. The woman who healed her body didn't hope for health. She knew herself as healthy until her body had no choice but to comply. The man who built his business from nothing didn't hope for success. He walked in the assumption of it until the world rearranged itself to match. This is what I mean when I say your consciousness is the only reality, not the circumstances, not the conditions, not what everyone else sees or believes or tells you is possible. What you are conscious of being, that's what you experience, period. So let me ask you directly, what are you conscious of being right now? Not what you want to be, not what you want to be, not what you're trying to become. But what are you? What do you accept as true about yourself in this very moment? Because that acceptance, that inner conviction, is writing your future right now. Every assumption you hold about yourself is a seed planted in the infinite garden of your subconscious mind. And those seeds, they always grow, they always grow, they always bear fruit. You cannot plant apple seeds and harvest oranges. You cannot assume limitation and experience freedom. The law is impersonal. It doesn't care if your assumptions are good or bad, helpful or harmful. It simply says yes to whatever you impress upon it. It simply says yes to whatever you impress upon it. It simply creates whatever you are conscious of being. This is why I've spent my life teaching people to monitor their inner conversations, to watch their thoughts like a gardener watches their soil. Because you wouldn't let weeds take over your garden if you wanted flowers, would you? Then why let negative assumptions take over your mind if you want a beautiful life? Every time you say I am, you're defining your say I am. You're defining yourself. You're telling your subconscious who you are. And your subconscious who you are. And your subconscious believes every word. So what are you telling yourself? Are you saying, I am tired, I am broke, I am broke, I am sick, I am unlucky? Or are you saying, I am strong, I am healthy, I am healthy, I am prosperous, I am blessed? The words you speak after I am become your reality. This isn't poetic language. This isn't poetic language. This is spiritual law. When you say I am poor, you're not just describing your current bank account. You're programming bank account. You're programming poverty into your consciousness. You're instructing your subconscious mind to maintain that state, to find evidence for it, to keep you locked in that experience. But when you say I am prosperous, even if your bank account doesn't reflect it yet, you're planting a seed of abundance. You're giving your subconscious a new instruction, a new direction, a new reality to create. Your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't say, but wait, let me check your wallet first. It simply accepts what you declare and goes to work making it true. This is why the mystics and sages throughout history have been so careful with their words. They understood that speech is creative, that every statement is a prayer, that every statement is a prayer, that every declaration is a command to the universe. Jesus said, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. He wasn't talking about moral judgment. He was revealing a principle of mind. Your words justify or condemn your circumstances. They create your experience. So I'm asking you right now to become aware of how you're using these two most powerful words in any language. Listen to yourself today. Catch yourself in the act of defining yourself. When you say I am, what follows? When you say I am, what follows? Is it life-giving or life-limiting? Is it expansive or contracting? Is it expansive or contracting? Is it aligned with what you want to experience, or is it reinforcing what you want to escape? Because here's the truth. You cannot outgrow your own self-definition. If you constantly say, I am not good enough, you will sabotage every opportunity that requires you to be good enough. Your outer life will always conform to your inner declarations. But the moment you begin to say, I am worthy, I am capable, I am loved, something shifts. A door opens. Your subconscious begins to orchestrate circumstances that match this new identity. You don't have to believe it fully at first. You just have to speak it consistently. Start your day with powerful I am statements. Not as affirmations you're trying to convince yourself of, but as declarations of truth you're claiming. I am loved, I am prosperous, I am healthy, I am healthy, I am guided by infinite intelligence. Say these things not as wishes, but as present facts. Your subconscious doesn't respond to pleading. It responds to conviction. And here's what most people miss. The subconscious mind accepts what you persistently think and feel as true, regardless of external circumstances. It doesn't argue. It doesn't debate. It simply accepts and creates accordingly. When you declare, I am successful, your subconscious begins orchestrating circumstances, ideas, and opportunities that align with that identity. This is why the wealthy stay wealthy and the poor often stay poor. It's not about privilege or luck, it's about the dominant mental atmosphere they maintain. A person who thinks and feels prosperity will attract prosperity. A person who thinks and feels prosperity will attract more lack. It's mathematical. It's mathematical. It's law. But you might say, how can I declare I am prosperous when my bank account says otherwise? Isn't that lying? No, it's not lying. It's speaking to the invisible reality that precedes the visible one. Every physical thing you see, your car, your home, the device you're watching this on, existed first as thought, as invisible intelligence, before it manifested in form. When you say, I am prosperous, you're not denying your current circumstances. You're aligning with the truth of your being at the causal level, the level where all creation begins. You're impressing upon your subconscious the pattern you want expressed in your life, and your subconscious the pattern you want expressed in your life. And your subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, will accept that impression and bring it into material reality. Think of it like planting a seed. When you plant an apple seed, you don't stand over it every day saying, there's no apple tree here, this is a lie, I'm pretending. No, you understand that the tree is already within the seed in invisible form. You water it, nurture it, and trust the process. Your I am declarations are seeds. Plant them, water them with feeling and belief, and trust that the harvest is already assured. The transformation happens when you stop trying to manipulate the outer world and start impressing the inner world. Stop fighting circumstances and start changing consciousness, The outer will always conform to the inner, always conform to the inner.